Well, hello friends. We are getting towards the end of another garden season. I don't know where the time goes, but what I do know is I think it's fun to check in and see what the year was like. So while it's not over yet, I am in Southeast Iowa, Zone 5B, and we still have a beautiful long fall ahead of us. We have a little bit of summer left, but this is when the garden really starts changing, starts drawing in. Our days are shorter, so plants and trees start knowing dormancy is coming. So I think it's a good time to wrap up and see, what did the containers end like? What note did they end on? Because I will start switching over some to pumpkins or to fall containers here soon. And I think it's fun to see what worked well, what maybe didn't work well. And so Kip, my French Bulldog, and I are gonna go around with you and we're gonna look at a few containers. We're gonna look at some of the areas I planted this year, including the walkway behind me, and see how it worked, how it's happening, because guess what? Like every year, there were struggles. We are still in drought conditions here in Iowa, where I live, have been since last year, have been for a long time. And while we did have some nice rains in the middle of summer to keep things going, it was still hot and dry with excessive heat. So we're gonna go over all that. Some plants fare really well with that, some don't. Let's find out. So I'm gonna start up at the beginning of my driveway, at the entrance to my driveway, and that's where I have two urns that are somewhat small. They're cast iron urns, so they don't hold a lot of soil. So you have to really be choosy on what you put inside of them. Now, it can get noisy out here because of highway traffic, but what you're gonna notice behind me here on the ground are still there is a slight buzz of pollinators that are loving the Russian sage still. They loved the allium when they were blooming. They loved the calumet when it was blooming. And it has been really a beautiful bed where I have done no maintenance. No watering was needed here. Everything was planted last year. And all three of those plants took off and did wonderful on their own. But let's talk about the container first. So this container, I have two just like this on limestone plinths. And it's a small cast iron urn, which means it doesn't hold a lot of soil. So I have to be really choosy about what I put in it. So we have, of course, pencil cactus. And that can be, of course, when you have to watch, you don't want it around a lot of pets or animals. So I keep it up and away from things. But I've had this for years, and I keep it year to year. And I love it because here in full sun, it gets fiery red on the tips of it. And guess what? Super drought tolerant, along with the beautiful lemon coral sedum, so easy to care for. The Tradescantia, or this purple heart right here, it has been doing really well up until just the last couple weeks when we started getting really dry again, and I wasn't as keen on doing as much, maintenance on it. You can tell it started getting a little bit dried out along the edges and a little bit sunburned. But up until this point, it had been doing wonderful. Now, what I will do is take cuttings of this, because the purple heart is so easy to keep year to year. You can put it in water and let it root, or just put it into soil and let it root. And so I will have this for next year too with all the cuttings I take. In general, a lot of my plants I save year to year, from the aloe, agave, to things like the pencil cactus. My largest pencil cactus, which was about 5 foot tall, I did lose over the winter because the heat went out in the plant room and it was against a wall on the northwest corner. So it did die way back to almost nothing, but I still had plenty of the larger kind of medium-sized ones. So those ones I've been able to use. And you can see from the grass, it's brown here again because we are dry, but so many of these things are still thriving. The containers across the driveway were feeling really good up into again here a couple weeks ago when we got really dry and hot again. The angel wing senecio in that hot, dry weather just started to kind of curl up a bit. Up until then, they were looking really full. The mandevilla does really well in heat. It's a tropical plant. I would say the blooms on it weren't as strong as I wanted this year, but it did finally reach the top of each trellis. I have 3 of these here across this driveway. But the salvia in the back was more of the show in these containers. So next year, the way I would switch them up is maybe not only do salvia in the back, but also probably do some in front. And I would pick a different type of trailing plant for the front too. These prostrated more outwards and upwards, and I like ones that fall down a little bit more. So it's a good thing to learn each year. They're not always going to be perfect, but overall the appeal was good. This is never one people walk up close to or I'm up close to. It's one you drive in and you see, or I see from my kitchen window. So from that distance, it was looking beautiful, and it's really been one to be able to enjoy. And again, it takes harsh sun, and it did well over here. It's just there's a few plants I will switch up, especially those angel wing senecio. And you know what, let's just go in closer. We don't always show the things that don't work, but these just didn't work as well. You can see how they started to get crowded out, and then they started really just kind of curling up, and it was just not the right spot for them over here. And these are known to be kind of iffy unless they have a perfect spot. So that's a good note to me for next year of maybe not to choose these, but either way, the Mandevilla were definitely a winner, and the Salvia. Going up to my front door, there are 2 containers that match. These have probably been the highlight and one of my favorites this year. So I save the coffee cups elephant ear every year, and I brought them out this spring. They were small, but look how beautiful they filled in. So I'll be saving them again. I will dig them up and I'll take them into my plant room and let them just kind of go dormant over the winter. But then the lemon coral sedum really took off underneath all of them and started just to come down. Now I will say this pot especially gets a little bit more shade. So the lemon coral didn't get as bright yellow as it sometimes does, but it really filled in still. And then the Heliochrysum, which is one of the miniature ones. I think it's Silver Mist maybe. It's one of my favorites because it just fills in. And you can see here this purple heart again. It does get little flowers, but it really just started coming out in all directions. I love how these containers ended up looking. Since there are 2 of these containers, see how right beside each other? The only maintenance I had to do on them was when these leaves kind of fall over from the wind or just new ones pushing out, I come out and I nip back any of the fallen leaves, but otherwise there's nothing to do to them. Since I don't have normal blooming annuals in them, I don't have to deadhead them. They just always kind of look nice and full and large, and that's what I really want here, are things that just can kind of take care of themselves. And since it is against the road, this is my front walkway, they almost act as a little bit of a shelter or kind of a protection from just being exposed. And I really like that too. So these have been, to me, another really good winner where they just filled in. You can see there's a couple leaves I need to take from it, but they look so full and beautiful. And so, yeah, I'm excited to be able to save these plants again, use them next year, maybe in a different area. You know, maybe I'll try these actually across the driveway in those last containers I just showed. Up here on my front porch, you may remember a video this spring where I put together this succulent planter. It by far is always the least maintenance I have to do, but also fills in the best because it loves full sun, it loves dry heat, and that's exactly what it gets here. It gets all sun until sometime in the afternoon. You can see all these plants have really just exploded in here. What I love is the burrow's tail. Look how big that gets. You know, I feel like this can be a hard one indoors to have do exceptionally well, but then when you put it outside, it gets massive. And so many of the echeverias, look how big they get. I mean, this is my hand for reference. It's just beautiful. And then everything just fills in underneath. Now, 90% of this was from plants I saved from last year. So again, I will save all these I can. I will take them out individually, plant them in smaller containers, and then I will bring them out next year again. That's the fun part, is you can save these things and then they look so good, and look how full it is. A succulent planter, while it doesn't have the normal blooms, look at these echeveria blooms. I mean, you cannot get that. And I've seen hummingbirds out here on this just recently. So that to me is really part of the fun. And you can see like this kalanchoe, look how big it is getting here. And I love that bronzy color it gets on this new growth. This is an easy but really fun one. We're now going to be walking to my new path area, which if you remember in May, the path was put in, and then I did all the plantings around it soon after. So all these are just from this year, and I'm really excited because I have now not watered them for 2 months. I have only let rain or just their viability be able to keep them going, and that's on brand new plants this year. So that's, to me, it's going to show the versatility and determination of some perennials. And yes, there is a pumpkin out here. I just like a surprise pumpkin every so often. So this area, it has done well this year, but it hasn't filled in yet. A lot of filling in will come next year. But what you see here are lots of Terra variety of prairie dropseed grass. So this year they're all doing well, but next year they're really going to get much larger. You know, that 18 plus inches tall and round, and I'm excited for that. A lot of the beautiful other plants and perennials I did sporadically put in here will be popping out in much larger clumps. So we have lots of Monarda that'll be getting bigger. We of course have Baptisia, which you do know gets much bigger, and then Dark Towers penstemon get bigger too. So all these will just fill in with a sea of green grass and then wonderful blooms in the spring. The Veronica, or the Salvia I should say, the Salvia I have out here is doing really well. This is just the Caradonna variety, which you can see already. There's a little bee going around right there. I love that. They're just bringing in pollinators, which are helping my vegetable garden, helping their flowers. By the way, this is the one I said that died back from freezing over the winter. It slowly is coming back and eventually will, but at one time, you can see how big it really was. Look at those big stalk type trunks. It's okay, plants are resilient, they'll keep going. As we come up here around the corner, you can see I have a weeping beech and then lots of, I love Agastaki. I love, some people call it Agastache. It's just anise hyssop, and it is, to me, it's the Blue Fortune variety. It is just pure gold in the garden. Pollinators love it. It can naturalize and spread, but it is such a nice upright plant for especially out here where it's just, you know, out in the elements. It gets full brunt of wind. So out here I have lots of calamint, which was blooming really white. You can see there are still blooms hanging on. Back behind it, the Baptisia eventually will get much larger, almost like a large shrub, as will the Culver's root on either side of it. We have lots of allium out here. We have more Caradonna. Of course, Rudbeckia, just Goldstrom, classic Rudbeckia. So this is a Pollinator Haven, but also it's something that has become really drought tolerant, which it's showing already in its first year, even before I would say it's fully established. This area has just taken care of itself. I hand watered it for about the first two-ish months regularly, and now it has just been living on its own, which you can see. Look how tall they've gotten. So what I will do, and what I'm loving is, this is all gonna go dormant over the winter, so everything will die back to the ground. It's all perennials. Next spring, I'll bring a push mower in here and I will just mow it all and mulch it all back into the mulch that's there. So it's gonna be self-feeding, self-revitalizing, and just compost into itself, which to me is the best thing. So we are getting towards the end of the season where things are getting tall and leggy. So the Culver's root in the back, it didn't have a lot of root support to hold it up this year, obviously. So it got tall and leggy and it's falling over. Next year, as it starts setting in its roots, it will bring up more shoots and they will self-stabilize and be able to take it longer. Same with the Baptisia. It looks pretty small right now, but eventually in time, it will get that 4 foot about tall and wide and be a nice large structure back there with texture. To wrap up, I think it's also good to note and just talk a little bit about the big hedge of Limelight Hydrangeas I have. So they are in their third growing season. Well, kind of like full 3 growing seasons, not really, because I put them in a little over 2 years ago, but this is their third full growing season. Last year was their first full growing season. The year before is when I had planted them. And they're doing really well. I did have to supplement them with water 2 times so far, and you could see I could have here at the end because of the ones that are turning brown. So when limelights don't get adequate water, their blooms will prematurely brown and dry because they're not getting the water they need. So I usually try to choose things when I'm watering just because I don't want to waste more water than I need to just for selfish reasons. If plants are going to do okay and going to make it, I don't water them. And I know these will do fine. They would have loved having some more water, and maybe in other years I will. But just the blooms turning brown this year is okay. These have grown by leaps and bounds by this year, by year 3. They are right now at a good 4 foot high. So what I will do now every year after this, I haven't trimmed them too much, but now that we're in about 4 foot, we're in that mark, that's what I'll trim them back to every year. I wanted them to have good, sturdy, solid growth up to about 4 foot. And then every other year, I'm going to trim them back to that 4 foot so they have that sturdy base to start from and let them branch off from there. Because I want these to get 8+ foot tall and be a tall hedge of beautiful blooms behind the woodward arborvitae that are just in front of them. That way, from the house, from the backyard, you're going to see the blooms popping over those arborvitae, and it'll just be this beautiful hedge. So you can see, look at the blooms. I did fertilize them, of course, with Hollytone early in the spring. I usually only do it once. You can do it up to 2 times. But we're in fall now, and fall is not when you fertilize. It's not when you prune or trim. It's when you let things go. And so that's what I'm doing. I'm letting these now just go. There are still some beautiful blooms. I could pick a lot of them if I want to and let them dry in the house, but they're doing really well. Also, honorable mention to the prairie behind me. I've had to mow it only a couple times just to make sure the weed control is going well, but you can see how good the grass prairie type grasses did at actually starting to get hold. There are some wildflowers that I'm starting to see pop up. Those take a little longer to establish, and I'll probably overseed with some good prairie wildflower mix next year just because I want the wildflowers. But it's a pretty good year for it. So I hope that shows a few of the ins and outs of a year. The areas I just showed you are some of the newer areas, the things I've been working on this year, from containers to that brand new flower bed. My established areas that are, here are always obviously the other areas in the garden, like the one behind me that I just don't worry as much about. These are all Seaside Serenade, Bar Harbor Series hydrangeas. All those areas are ones I just try to do maintenance on, try to weed as needed, or if I need to water to keep things going. But these new areas are ones that I've taken more care to watch this year and taken you along on videos to show you. So I wanted to make sure you saw how they were now, because I think it's good to see each step of the way. And especially on the new beds I'm putting in, like that new flower bed, maintenance is key. So I try to do things now that are gonna be low maintenance, and that's gonna mean all perennials, letting it go dormant, mowing it off, mulching it back in. That's really no work. And that's really what I want. I can enjoy the color all season long, enjoy how it looks, but have no work associated with it. So I hope that helps see what my little area of this big world is, how it's doing, how it's growing, and what could be coming for next year. So actually, I would love to extend that walkway. I don't know if I will, but I would love that. So stay tuned, we'll see. But that means we'll probably have some videos soon coming up on a fall garden and what fall gardening means around here. It's actually when I start slowing down.